Good evening and welcome. I'm Jean Hopkins, Vice President of Communications for WGBH, and we are thrilled to have you joining us tonight for this celebration of Zoom's 50th anniversary. There are legions of Zoom fans across the country and around the globe, and many of you are here with us tonight, which is a testament to the impact of this groundbreaking series after 50 years. Hard to believe, but it has been 5 decades that GBH has been producing children's media for public television that empowers and entertains kids. For those of you who don't know, it was January 1972 when GBH introduced Zoom, a half-hour live television series for 8 to 12-year-olds. With a diverse cast, Zoom was a model of inclusion, shining a light on kids' unique backgrounds, personalities, and abilities. With its arts and science projects, skits and songs, Zoom became a national sensation, helping shape the next generation of GBH Kids programs. Zoom broke new ground in children's TV by featuring content sent in by kids and encouraging viewers to turn off the TV and do it. Letters to Zoom poured in by the tens of thousands. There were more than 1.5 million letters in the first 3 seasons. The show went on to run for 6 seasons, won 3 Emmy Awards, and then GBH brought it back for a second generation, a kind of resume, from 1999 to 2005. Tonight, we're going to hear about that first season. And before I introduce you to David Kamp, tonight's moderator, to talk about all things Zoom, let me take just a moment to go over a few details about this Zoom, the one we're all on, the Zoom platform that we're using for tonight's event. Like the Zoom TV show, we can't see you, but we want to hear from you. No zip code required. Just submit your questions by opening the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen and typing your question or comment. I know there will be lots of questions, and we'll do our best to get to as many as possible, but maybe not all. If you see a question from someone else that you like, you might want to have that answered, and you can vote for it by clicking the thumbs up. You also can customize your experience with captions that this Zoom provides. To turn this feature on, click the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen. These captions are done by the Zoom platform. And of course, we welcome you to take pictures and tag @GBH on Facebook and Twitter and @WGBH on Instagram. And now I'd like to introduce you to David Kamp. Like many of you, David is well-versed in Zoom, the TV show. He's a journalist and author of Sunny Days, the children's television revolution that changed America, a behind-the-scenes look at the stories and the cultural heroes of many of our beloved PBS television children's programs. So to welcome David, we thought we would start with a song that maybe some of you know, and feel free to sing along.
I'm David Kamp, and it's my honor to be with you tonight to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Zoom, the groundbreaking children's television show. I'm the author of a book called Sunny Days, the children's television revolution that changed America. And tonight you can see that I've got my rugby shirt on, and even though it looks like I'm sort of a superannuated version of Steve from Blue's Clues, the rugby shirt is really to celebrate the show we're all celebrating tonight, Zoom. And if you're like me, those clips you just saw have already transported you back to a magical, wonderful, warm place from your early childhood. So without further ado, I want to introduce the man who made this program possible. I'll tell you a little bit about him. Christopher Sarson was an Englishman who in his 30s, in the 1960s, came over with his wife from England, where he'd worked at Granada Television, and came to work at WGBH in Boston, where among other fabulous achievements, he co-created Masterpiece Theater. Christopher, good evening. It's so good to see you.
Nice to be here.
And I should say good morning, because you are in Auckland, New Zealand?
I'm in Auckland, New Zealand, and I'm just about to have lunch after we've finished talking.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I won't keep you from your lunch too long, but I think we should start simply with the impetus for your doing this. You had not you'd done some children's educational programming, but it was your own children who gave you the idea in a way, correct?
I've always been interested in children, and with my first wife, I had two who in 1972 were 8 and 6, and they were youngsters, and they were watching television, and I watched it with them. And they were watching the Partridge Family and the Brady Bunch and all those shows. Nothing wrong with those, nothing wrong with the cartoons on Saturday morning, but none of them reflected the lives that they were living. And they went to a birthday party, and their faces when they got to the room that was already filled with children was a delight. They were kind of saying, I'd like to join you. I'd like you to be my friend, but I don't want you to laugh at me. There was that tentative, that lovely sort of interesting feeling that I wanted to capture on television. So after a couple of pilots and that kind of thing, we ventured to do a program which at first was called Zoom In, Zoom Out, because we were going to zoom in to the children's lives and zoom out to show the context. But it got abbreviated to Zoom, and it went on the air just 50 years and a couple of weeks ago.
Extraordinary. And it was a bare bones operation, from what I understand. You had a budget of something like $30,000 to start out with?
We luckily had a show called The Advocates running at WGBH at that time, and they had finished a season with $30,000 left, and the program manager had to give it back to CPB. And instead of that, he said, can I please use it on a pilot for a children's show? And CPB said yes, and so we started Zoom. And one of the indications of that is that on the pilot, you can see that the Zoom is actually made out of the big Zoom letters that you saw at the beginning of this show, is actually made out of cardboard.
Right. And was it later a more sturdy material? Or
later we got to cardboard in 3D, and that was sturdier, yeah.
So really good cardboard, in other words. And you can see that I'm wearing the stripes in homage. And
I'm very impressed, and thank you for it.
Thank you. Well, it's my pleasure, truly. But I wanted to ask about the stripe motif, because it wasn't just the giant Zoom in the back. It was also the kids' shirts. How did that come about?
Well, we all had production meetings, and one of the questions at one of the production meetings was, what are the kids going to wear? And Sears had a special on rugby shirts of $5 each. So we got 7 of those, and we were all set there. I showed them at one of the production meetings, and the designer said, hey, there's a good idea. So that's how it got incorporated into the show.
A sale at Sears was all it took, and that was it.
It's Sears. They're not here today, but otherwise we'd give them credit.
And how about casting the show? It's not lost on viewers that this was revolutionary in that you had kids who were A, not professionals, and B, a really mixed group of people from different economic strata, different races, and girls and boys equally represented.
Well, for the first season, where obviously there wasn't a pilot that people could look at, we got art teachers and teachers in schools to send us the names of kids that they thought were imaginative and that got on well with their peers. So those were the criteria to begin with. For the second season, well, as soon as we went on the air, the phone started ringing, can I be on Zoom? And for the second season, we had, believe it or not, 1,000 kids who wanted to audition. And I have a heart that doesn't say no. So they came in groups of 15, and the music director, Newt Wayland, and the choreographer, Billy Wilson, with whom the show couldn't have happened without whom the show couldn't have happened.
Yes.
Were just so instrumental and so beautiful and that kind of thing. Guess what we began the audition with? We're gonna Zoom. Everybody knew the Zoom song. And then we did things like get a very tiny ball and throw it to one of the auditionees, and he had a choice, or she had a choice. She could either flick it to somebody else, or she could make it big and throw it to that. That was the kind of imagination. That was a
Just kind of improv work with the ball to see where they would take it.
Exactly.
Right, right.
Because improvisation was an important part.
I'm glad you mentioned Newton Wayland and Billy Wilson, because I think people take for granted that that song always existed, and that zip code song always existed, and that great choreography always existed, but it was actually two very distinctive individuals. Can you tell us about Newt and Billy?
Well, I came across Newt a couple of years before Zoom, and he was part of a music show that I was producing and directing. That was really boring. It was called Performance. We changed it to rehearsal, and it became really interesting, and that was thanks to Newt. I had seen, believe it or not, Billy Wilson in London in a show, a dance show that was.
He was a professional dancer as well as a choreographer?
He was a professional dancer teaching
Right.
at the Emily Blake Dance School and in Boston. And he was, they were both very amenable to work with kids. And Billy in particular had a great gift for putting the 7 kids of the cast into a position, moving them to another position and saying, you've got 8 bars, 8 measures of music to get from one to another. Get there however you want. So it was their movements, it was their choreography, but they were getting it within a formalized way. Newt was just brilliant at writing music, and he came up with the theme and played it for me in the rehearsal room. And luckily the Zoomers were there, because I heard the theme that he'd written, which we all heard today, and said, Newt, I think we can do better than that. It seemed sort of open-ended. It didn't seem, you know, quite finished and polished enough. And as I was saying that, the kids in the background began singing it. And they said, what's that? You know, it's great. I said, well, Newt suggests it's the theme tune. Great, they said, yeah, that's. So this was a children's show. Children decided what was on it.
Right down to the theme song that became so familiar to everyone. Now, speaking of, you mentioned how when the auditions for the second round began, you had thousands. When in real time, like I'm talking about the first episode to the second episode to the third, did you get a sense of this show having national reach and becoming a phenomenon?
That wasn't something that went through our heads. We went on the air on Sunday, January the 9th. On Monday, guess what? We got no mail. Takes time. On Tuesday, we got 700 letters. And that was a lot for the 5 of us who were working the show. We put them aside and said we'd get to them later. On Wednesday, we got 1,000. And on Thursday, we got 2,000. And that was a lot of mail. And we ended up getting 2,000 letters a week for the run of the show for the 6 seasons. And that was pretty phenomenal. I know that it was a national reach because the local stations were doing crazy things. Like Chicago would run the same show for 5 days a week. And the kids in Chicago apparently loved it. But, you know, it's not something that you plan to do. And it was the same in Los Angeles. It was the same in all over the States.
So it was the closest thing in 1972, way pre-internet, to a sort of instantaneous viral hit, in that you got the feedback right away that week.
Yes.
Yes. And the kids, did it affect them? Did you let them know? Did you withhold from them how widespread the viewership was?
I'm sure a lot of kids know Bernadette's arm thing, as we call it. And she was the only one who saw the letters pertaining to that arm thing, because she didn't want to do it on air, but the letters persuaded her that they should. No, we kept kids away from the mail, and we've been looking at it recently, and it's quite extraordinary. Some of the things, people fell in love with Nina playing the guitar. People really love Joe's sense of humor, and why, I can't think. But it's a lot of, we got a lot of mail and a lot of fun.
And it's extraordinary to me that you are still in touch with your Zoomers. They call you the Zoom Papa. And it's my understanding that there are 21, I call them kids, but they're all somewhere north of
In their
being 50.
60s. Yeah, right.
And that you still have in person and now post-pandemic or during the pandemic, virtual reunions, and they call themselves the Sarson 21 because they still stick together after all these years, and you maintain friendships with them and they are still friends with each other.
It's extraordinary, and I don't know another show that does that. What's extraordinary about it is not just that we're still in touch, I'm in touch with them, but they're in touch with each other. And people from different casts are interested in the other and what they're up to. We've got a grandfather in the casts now, and he showed us his grandchild, and we all went whoopee. One of the Zoomers is working with another Zoomer on a record. And, no, they don't call them records nowadays, do they? Working on music for the public. And, that's wonderful too. I'd like to read the names of the 21. I'll do it very quickly. I'm sure people will.
Please do if you've got them.
Louise, Danny, Edith, Neil, Tim, and Mike are people who won't be on one of these little get-togethers, but next Wednesday, February the 2nd, you can see another of these get-togethers with you and the following cast members: Jay, Anne, Maura, Leon, Bernadette, Laurie, and Donna. And they're going to be with you.
Yes, I should make clear to our viewers that if you go into the chat section, GBH will make available the link to join that. That will be a separate event a week from tonight, February 2nd, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern. And this will be a group from the later seasons, second and third seasons, because tonight we're focusing on the original season. And the other thing I want to mention while I'm talking about looking in the chat is to please keep sending in your questions, and we will do our best to address them when we bring the cast on. One that's already come through, we're not going to answer it tonight because it's about Bernadette and her arm thing. How did Bernadette come up with the arm thing? Why did it become, look, Christopher, you're good. This man is 87 years old, by the way, and look how nimble and sharp I aspire to you, sir, to your state of being at 87. But Bernadette will be joining us next week. But tonight we are going to focus on the season 1 cast. Christopher, I think another thing is just the sheer chaos or seeming chaos or anarchy of it, that these kids were barefoot running across the cavernous Studio A of WGBH. It's almost like a benign version of Lord of the Flies, where you just set them free. Was it really that unsupervised? I mean, how many adults were in the room with them?
No, it really was that unsupervised. We had Bruce Marston, we had Kate Taylor, we had all kinds of wonderful people. We had the cameraman in particular, and the floor manager and people. They took the kids under their wing, and you talk to them about it. As soon as I'm off, you talk to the cast about it because they're still thrilled with the relationship they have. Julia Child was in the next studio rehearsing.
She was there with her mock-up kitchen, right? Or her real kitchen, I suppose.
As you know, she was a tall lady, so her cabinets were taller than usual. Right. And she would hide the kids inside these cabinets and get them to pass her things that she needed, like a spatula or, whatever.
That is fantastic. Julia Child and the Zoomers together. That is wonderful. Yeah. And I want to say again to our audience that we already have a ton of questions coming in, but do send them in. The ones that get uploaded are the ones I'll see and pass on to our Zoomer guests. And we actually have some past Zoomers in our viewing audience tonight. So welcome. And I think there's even some from the reboot Zoom in the aughts.
Oh, great.
So I want to welcome all the Zoomers who are participating as well. And please do keep sending in your questions. Christopher, I like sort of the guerrilla filmmaking aspect of Zoom that you've told me about when we've conversed in the past, such as when someone we're going to meet tonight, Tracy, got injured on the set. And instead of you saying, well, we're shutting down the show, tell us what you did.
The kids were devastated. And there were 6 kids who weren't hurt, and there was one who was rushed to hospital. And her parents, by the way, when I called them, said, "Oh, don't worry, she's always doing, some, well, you can ask her about that." But anyway, the others, I said, quite sort of off the cuff, what experience do you have of hospitals? And as soon as they started talking, we got the cameras rolling, and we got the hospital's Zoom wrap that we saw on the first episode last week.
Right, and the Zoom wrap became a recurring feature on the show in which you had kids just speaking openly about thorny issues.
The questions they asked were unbelievable. This is verbatim. My parents fight a lot. Do your parents fight a lot? Please talk about it on Zoom. Hello, I mean, they respected the Zoomers' input and points of view. It was interesting.
And I think we can't talk about 1972 without talking about the unrest that was going on, particularly in Boston. You had the busing crisis brewing, and you had the Vietnam War and the anti-war protests, and there was so much happening. And were you conscious of the show being an antidote to that, or perhaps a roadmap for a way out of that?
I was conscious of the fact that those things were going on, but I'm not a politically sort of oriented person. And I set out quite selfishly to do a program that my kids would get a value out of. The value that I have happened to be multi-ethnic, happened to be multi-everything. And that's why Zoom turned out the way it was. It wasn't a deliberate attempt to end the Vietnam War or anything, but it was certainly designed to give people a lot of pleasure. And it certainly has, because even now, 50 years later, the strangest things happen. I was at a dinner where a couple of kids who'd watched Zoom were invited by their parents to be at the dinner. And all the parents, the other 8 people around the table, were talking about, it was in Colorado, we're talking about the bison that had got away and got killed on I-25. They were talking about the weather. We were talking, it was boring. And one of these kids leaned over to the other and said, "In Abu Dhabi, aren't we sitting with a lot of boring people?" Imagine their surprise when I said, "In Abu Dhabi, yes, I agree with you." And, it lasted 30 years for them, and people still sort of talk it, and it's obviously made a big impact.
Well, Christopher, believe it or not, we've used up our Christopher and David time, and we have to get to our Zoomers, but I'm so appreciative of your coming, putting your lunch aside and joining us tonight. And we'll ask them more about the Abu Dhabi language. And I wish you the best, and thank you so much. And I'll see you next week at the event on February 2nd.
Now, you're very welcome, and it is certainly time for the Zoomers.
It certainly is. And first, we're going to go to Jamie Reese at GBH, who's going to talk about GBH.
Hi, I'm Jamie Reese from GBH's Member Engagement Department. Thank you so much for joining us during tonight's event. Virtual programs like Come On and Zoom are made possible by GBH members, viewers and listeners like you who want to keep public media alive and well and accessible to all. So you may be wondering, how can I support GBH as a member? Well, for $6.25 a month as a GBH sustaining member, or for a one-time payment of $75, we would be happy to send you the book Sunny Days, The Children's Television Revolution That Changed America, is our way of saying thank you for your support. From best-selling writer and your host this evening, David Kamp, this is the behind-the-scenes story of the cultural heroes who created the beloved children's TV programs Sesame Street, Electric Company, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Free to Be You and Me, and Schoolhouse Rock. There's also a section of the book entirely devoted to Zoom. There are 3 ways for you to give tonight. First, you can go online to gbh.org/support events, or you can text the letters GBH to 800-204-3811. You can also scan the QR code behind me, which will open a donation form on your smartphone or smart device. Giving is as simple as it is secure. Please consider becoming a member tonight. Your support is so vital to fulfilling our GBH mission to offer insightful, objective, and necessary information to all of the audiences we serve, from Boston to across the world, people young and old. Thanks again for joining us. And now let's zoom back to you, David, for more.
And thank you, Jamie, for that. And people, please do try to give to GBH. And indeed, if you give $75 or more tonight, you will get, yes, a signed copy of this book behind me, Sunny Days, The Children's Television Revolution That Changed America. Now we're going to get to what you really want to see, which is our 1972 Cast 1 Zoomers. I think we're going to introduce them, though, the way you remember them. So let's hear it.
I'm Joe. I'm Nina. I'm Kenny. My name's Tracy. I'm Tommy. I'm Nancy. Oh, I'm John. Who are you? What do you do? How are you? Let's hear from you. We need you.
I can't believe that I get to be with all of you. I mean, you have no idea how extraordinary this is. I'm going to start this out by saying, who are you? What do you do? Because that's from the song you just heard. And I think it's nice to catch up. So we'll go in the order you just saw, everyone. Joe, who are you and what do you do?
Well, thank you, David. And before I get there, I want to thank you. I want to thank Gene Hopkins. I want to thank Liz and Josh. I want to thank Abby Blake. Of course, Christopher Sarson, our Zoom papa, the rest of the Sarson 21, and all the participants who are watching today, and all the Zoom fans for half a century. Wow.
No.
Wow.
Who are you and what do you do?
So I'm
Joe?
Joe. I'm a child psychiatrist, the chief medical officer of Riverside Community Care. I have a radio show, The Dr. Joe Show. I've got 5 books. The 5th one's coming out soon. Drugs Free Theater is one of my nonprofits. And I have a kid who has her own science comedy TV show, Science with Sophie. That's who I am in one breath. Thank you, David.
Whew. Okay. And Nina, who are you and what do you do? And maybe be a little more succinct than Joe.
I'm not sure I can do that, but I'm Nina and I'm retired and I am spending as much time as I can with friends and family and the ocean in Maine. So that's what I'm doing these days.
That sounds awesome. Kenny Pyers, can you tell
What?
us who are you?
What do you want? Huh?
What do you do, Kenny? Who are you?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. I don't. Right now, I'm retired and searching for a job to get back acclimated. I've been done since the pandemic and everything. So but I'm retired military, so
Right. 28 years in the Air Force.
I can handle everything.
Yeah, you were in the Air Force, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
That is impressive.
Yeah,
And,
28.5 years. So
that is not nothing. That is extraordinary. And now let's go to Tracy. Who are you and what do you do?
Hi, I'm Tracy, and I am, besides being a wife and a mother of 3 amazing daughters, I'm a recently retired CEO and executive director of an association serving the restaurant industry. And then prior to that, I was a radio promotions director. So I had kind of had 2 careers.
Okay, Tommy, who are you and what do you do?
All right, I'm Tommy White, and I'm a video technician at MIT. And on my own, I dabble in music and movies.
Okay, and
Can I just add that Tommy's did that? He said it was short and sweet, like he is. So thank you, Tommy.
and without further ado, Nancy, who are you and what do you do?
Good evening, all. I'm Nancy, and I am a housewife. After many years of working in television, had children, got married, and decided to just take care of them. And that's what I do.
Awesome. And now let's get to our discussion. I think the thing we have to ask first, having watched that introduction, is, Joe, what was up with that hair? That extraordinary mop of hair?
Yeah, thank you so much. At the time, we called it an Isro. I don't know if I can say that anymore. That was me. And I will tell you that this is my COVID look now. And for those of you who can see the back.
Oh,
gosh.
Oh,
I'm
my
gonna get that.
goodness, Lord.
Thank you. And I think you can see that back there too. That's
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about that.
Yeah,
We're
that
gonna
was
talk
up on
about
the
that.
wall of WGBH. But thank you for asking. Dave. It was a
And
hairy situation.
I think the other thing, Joe, while we've got you here, is your origin story of getting on this show, because some people have noticed that you had an English accent in that first season, and you're a Boston kid. How does a Boston kid have an English accent?
Well, actually, I had been born in Cape Town, South Africa, and had lived between Cape Town and England for many, many years before I came to the States. So that is why I had a British accent, because it was still really part of who I was and who I will always be. You have to be able to do your accents when you want to. Thank you, David.
And as far as getting cast on the show, actually, I'm curious, Kenny and Nancy, you were both going to the same school, the
Yes.
Elma Lewis High
Elma
School.
Lewis School of
Alma
Fine
Lewis,
Arts.
yeah, School of Fine
Yep.
Arts. Yeah.
Yep.
And,
And Bill,
And
that's where
Leon.
Billy was our ballet teacher, and actually the head of the ensemble.
Mhm.
And he was hired by GBH and brought us along to audition for some sort of idea that they had for a kids show. So.
And so this
That's
is
how
Billy
we came.
Wilson, the choreographer. And he
Yes.
right.
Mhm.
And did you feel at all intimidated by doing dance, or was it something you're already doing at the Elma Lewis School?
Mm.
Ken?
It was just something that I learned and was taught. No, intimidated? No.
No.
Mm-mm.
No.
Mm-mm.
At Elma Lewis School of Fine Arts, we were always preparing. We were always either in dance class or in music class or in drama class, or there was always some sort of skit that we were doing somewhere before something.
Yeah.
So it was sort of like the natural progression to just keep doing the same thing that we were doing.
Fine
That's
arts.
what
It I don't know. It kind of set us up to be on Zoom. Kind of. I don't know, Nancy. You tell me, but it's like, we learned everything. We learned everything in that school.
Everything from soup to nuts, yes. From sewing costumes and music and musical arrangement. But
I made my own shirt.
Exactly.
Back then.
Exactly. So I think in
Learn to
an
cook.
off way, it may have prepared us for Zoom, but it was an audition. We were just kids. I was 8 years old when I auditioned for Zoom. So we just got, Billy grabbed a bunch of us, and Kenny and Leon were there, and we all just went with Billy wherever Billy took us. And it was like, okay, here you go. And so it was.
Leon, by the way, I just want to make clear, Leon is Leon Mobley, who joined in the second. They held Leon in reserve, but Leon is one of the people who will be joining us next week. And now you are the youngest, Nancy, correct, in this cast? And, and the senior members were Tommy and Nina. So Tommy, tell us about how you were living in Dorchester, I understand.
Yes,
I'm from New Jersey. I can't say.
Yes, I may have the true Boston accent because of where I grew up, and it was kind of a rough and tumble place. But in my house, the big gathering spot was around the TV. So and GBH was the go-to station to learn how to do things. So even at school, we watched the 21-inch classroom. I think you discussed that in your book. And I also watched one of Christopher's earlier efforts before Zoom. It was Summer Dew, and I learned some things from that. But the big influential show for me was a show hosted by Jim Henson called The Muppets on Puppets. And I learned how to put my own act together. And I started doing 5 shows a day, and I got plucked from that world to audition for a show described to me as a children's laugh-in, which turned out to be Zoom.
Right. And for people who are too young to remember what Laugh-In was, it was a really fast-paced variety show hosted by Dan Rowan and Dick Martin. And both Zoom and Sesame Street were to some degree based on the pacing of Laugh-In. Nina, you were actually the thoughtful, poetic one of this group. You performed this extraordinary song called It Began in March, It Ended in May. Tell us about where that song came from.
Oh, you know, I was a young teenager in love. What can I say? And, I used to like, you know, writing my own songs. I wrote a couple of others, and one of them was supposed to be on Zoom, and then I insisted that it was, you know, that one. Anyway, so like I said, I used to play the guitar and write songs, and so that was my teenage angst song. I think it's really worth checking out. And I meant to say that we actually are going to make available a link for you to go to the archives where I think something like 100 episodes of Zoom are being made available for your viewing. So please look in the chat segment of your Zoom webinar software for that. And now I think we have to look at some viewer questions because they're coming in so fast and furious. One is a simple one.
Wait, excuse me. What about Tracy?
What about Tracy?
Oh, Tracy.
What about Tracy?
I was going to get, no, there was a segue here.
Oh, there was a segue? I'm sorry. Let me
See,
put
Joe,
myself on mute.
You
Hold on,
might understand that there was actually a, that Joe and I have a pre-existing relationship. He hosts a radio show with a video simulcast. So he's used to being a host. So if you see Joe becoming the host, that's just a normal part of his dynamic.
Sorry, David.
The question we have from someone is, was it sad to leave Zoom when your time was over? And Tracy, I know that you didn't just leave Zoom, you left Boston.
I did. So about a year after I finished my stint on Zoom, my dad took a job in Dallas, Texas. And so at 11 years old, our family was moved to what I thought was the wild, wild west, where I thought people wore cowboy hats to school and had horses in their backyards. And so it was like going to a foreign land from Boston for sure. So it was sad. It was sad leaving the show, as we all had to experience. But then a lot of the Zoomers still kept in touch, and they would go to birthday parties and they would have reunions. And I missed all that as I moved off to Texas and experienced something that was, I don't know if you wanted me to share it now, but when I moved to Texas, when we all were cast on Zoom, we were the same person before and after to all of our friends. So the kids that we'd grown up with in our elementary schools, nothing changed. But when I moved to Texas, Zoom was 2 years in, and we'd already won an Emmy and, you know, had a lot of national press. So I guess we had some sort of celebrity, if you would call it that, but I didn't really realize it until I moved someplace else. And all of a sudden people were pointing at me, calling me Zoom girl, and kids don't know how to handle that kind of stuff. So generally kids are mean. So I was teased incessantly about being the Zoom girl.
It's funny because I'm sorry, because
that's okay.
I've heard different experiences from different people. Kenny, you said that it was actually a bit of cachet socially for you to be.
To this day, it wasn't a negative thing. It's always been a positive thing. And then people that I don't even know that know me because of that.
Now we have a question from Day Thomas, which touches on what we're talking about, saying, was it fun being on Zoom? Was it the best thing you ever did in your life? And I'll open that up to the floor.
Yeah. Let me answer that real quick right now. That was the best thing I ever did, and I'm glad I had that opportunity.
All right. Does anyone else have something to add on that topic?
I think for me, being on Zoom was one of the best things that ever happened to me. It led me into television production. I got exposed to a wide variety of things that I've never seen or never even knew existed. So Zoom opened my eyes, Zoom broadened my horizons, Zoom afforded me the opportunities to become involved in television production that I wouldn't have had without Zoom. I honestly believe that.
Does anyone want to talk about Franny Dooley? We have a question about
Fanny Dooley.
Fanny Dooley.
Yes.
Fanny Dooley, right.
Fanny Dooley loves Gene and Abby, but hates David. Sorry, David. It's just
But it's true.
It's true.
The person who wrote the question typed Franny, but I'm taking the bullet.
Thank you.
Franny must be her brother.
That's right.
Well, where did you learn Fanny Dooley from? Was that a Newt thing or a Billy thing? How did that happen?
That was from the show.
I don't remember where it came from.
Yeah, that was just
I
a
thought it
segment that
came-
they brought to us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking maybe it come from somebody writing it in.
Yeah.
As an
I
idea.
imagine so.
I think
Chris
so.
Bixby has a question. What were some of your favorite segments from Zoom?
Well, I love
For me,
the Sea of Terror.
Oh, all right, go ahead, Tom. Go ahead.
You go.
I got to be Dr. Weaver, mad scientist in the Sea of Terror.
I remember that.
That was
And,
that's one of the
and I'll
ones
tell you,
I
that
was
was
going to
so
go. We got
fantastic.
me
I
and
found the
Joe
original
and John,
script.
and we were like,
Yeah.
you know, you were the villain.
And you know what? Joe was supposed to be the villain.
Oh my goodness.
And it was switched at the last minute for me.
Yeah.
I think while we're talking about segments,
Yeah, I liked it.
If you'll indulge me, I think that the gang watching needs to see the gang talking perform. And we have the full clip of The Cat Came Back, which is one of the most memorable musical numbers.
That was, true.
So
true.
let's play that, GBH folks.
Oh, wow. You going to do that?
Here we go.
Audio?
No, I know. Here we go.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Nancy.
Oh my goodness.
Once there was a man
Oh,
who
Lord.
had troubles of his own. He had a yellow cat that wouldn't leave its home. He tried and he tried to give the cat away. He gave it to a man going far, far away. But the cat came back the very next day. The cat came back. They thought he was a goner, but the cat came back. He just wouldn't stay away.
That's just extraordinary. That's just extraordinary.
Yeah. So that was really, Billy Wilson's brilliance is he didn't make us do things exactly. So he would say, okay, here's the basic idea, and then you just run with it. And that's what we did. It was brilliant.
But like, for example, that bow-legged dance move that you were all doing, that had to have come from Billy, or was that something that you invented?
I think Billy came up with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the one thing was Billy, like Joe was saying, Billy had this wonderful knack of being able to tap into our own uniqueness and say, okay, here you go. This is your time. And like Chris was saying, you've got 10 beats to get from point A to point B. Get over there any way you want. So it wasn't like we were choreographed in the sense that we knew where we had to be at certain points in time, but getting there was just on our own.
Right.
And
I
that
want to
was
point out
nice.
that there were 7 kids performing, and John Runig, who is the 7th kid, could not join us tonight, but the 6 of you are very much present there. And I'm amazed by your easy poise and presence in those things, because you're not professionals when you're that age. Tracy, where did it come from, that performing poise?
Yeah, no, we wasn't.
I guess that's what they were looking for in some way when they took hundreds of kids from elementary schools all over Boston, and we weren't actors, and they didn't want actors, but they were looking for kids that were curious, that were willing to learn, that wanted to be themselves. And so I think it was just innate in our personalities that we were willing to give it a try and do whatever they wanted us to put ourselves out there to do. So I guess that's what they were looking for when they were casting.
The one thing that I wanted to say, I was just having a flashback. I remember recording the songs and couldn't wait to see what we had to do to go with the songs. Do you know what I mean? It was that type of excitement. So it was, they tapped into all of our innate ability.
And Nina, I noticed that like you and Tommy are so much taller than everyone else. Was that put to an efficient use by Billy? The fact that you were the twin towers?
Well, I was the tallest person in my elementary school, so go figure. It wasn't a great thing as a girl to be the tallest one. But yes, I was tall. So.
It's
And
funny,
Nina,
I was shortest in my class.
Really?
Well,
that's
I was with
awesome.
I was with younger kids on the show. So
Nina, I think it's extraordinary too, because you told me, but when we first met, that you were actually visually and still are visually impaired, and so to move around on the set was not the easiest thing for you.
No, it wasn't, but had such great cast members, and they would help me out, and so it was really.
And we didn't know that. We didn't know that. We
Yeah.
didn't know that at the time. So
We were blind. We were blind to that. Really.
We were blind to that, exactly, Joe.
yeah.
Too soon, Joe. Too soon.
Oh,
right.
too soon.
So,
Karen, I've got to take some questions because there are so many, and we really have to honor our viewers here.
Sure.
Karen Smith says, I was in second grade when the first episode aired. My friends and I talked about the previous night's show all the time, reenacted skits, etc. How many of you went on to careers in TV or theater because of being on Zoom?
Me?
I didn't.
I started off that way, and then
I did too.
and then had a major change in plans. But definitely started off that way. It was exciting. It was lovely to do.
I would have liked to have done it, but no, I didn't.
And
It's
Tom,
probably a
you
good
were,
thing.
Tom, you were in a punk band after Zoom. Is that correct?
well, that's for fun. But I definitely jumped right behind the camera and took TV production at Emerson College because my mom noted that those behind the camera kept their jobs.
Mhm. I learned that the hard way. I went the acting route for a number of years. And then halfway through college, I said, no, I want to be in production, and came back to WGBH. So it worked in local programming, making documentaries until I moved on.
And right after Zoom, Tommy and I were actually in a show together. Were we not?
We went to audition for The King and I. Is that what you're referring to?
That's what I'm referring to.
Joe, they found I was too tall to be Anna's son. But
Yes.
you got the role. You got your role. What did you play?
I was Prince Chulu Longhorn.
Oh boy! And
Yeah.
when Joe entered the melody tent,
wow!
Well, you should have heard the applause. He brought the place down just walking in.
And I tell you, that's actually an interesting story. If I could take a moment.
Sure.
So 10 years before, I had been at the Melody Tent down in Cape Cod watching a show.
Oh my goodness!
10 years later, I was on the stage
Wow.
in King and I. It was really fun.
Nice.
And the star of the show was Betsy Palmer,
Betsy Palmer.
who
That's right.
showed up
Okay.
in, what is it, Friday the 13th?
Yeah, I think so.
Really?
Betsy
Yes.
Palmer. Yep.
And then
Wow.
Nancy, you had a brush with some similar celebrity at Boston University, where
Yes.
one of your classmates or peers was named Julie Ann Smith.
Julianne Smith, who everybody knows now is Julianne Moore. She used to cry in the bathroom and say she was no good. And I'd say, sweetheart, you'll make it. So look at her now. It was my doing.
All
I'm the one that pushed
I
her.
have to get some more questions because we have so many of them, and people are so inquisitive and curious.
This is
a good
crazy.
one. You're going to have to bear with me. This is from Lisa S., who says, I was an art director and prop master for Zoom 2 season 7. Oh, actually, no, this question is about the later version of Zoom. So if it's about Zoom 2. So we'll go aside from that one. Let's go to Doyle's question, which is, what are some of the funniest moments you experienced on Zoom?
Wow.
I don't know whether you can really say all of them, David.
I know.
There were some really quite funny moments. No.
Yeah.
Stop it, Joe.
Kind of a cop-out. I think you
Funny?
I'll tell you from my perspective, that was the first time I ever had yogurt in my life because of those people. We used to
Yogurt,
get it, and we get it out the
And the vending
machine
machine.
right there.
Vending
and
machines,
everything.
yes.
That was the first time I had yogurt and iced coffee.
I think,
Wow.
Kenny, I think I introduced you to yogurt because my mom's Armenian and we ate yogurt at home all the time. And so
Yeah.
I got the
I don't
yogurt from
know.
the vending machine.
Yeah,
And I had
maybe.
you guys try it. So I gotta
On
give
the
a shout out to
subject
my
of
mom.
food, we have a
First time.
question from
First time.
Lori. We have a question from Lori saying, did you ever make some of the recipes? My favorite challah recipe came from your Zoom book.
Well, thank you.
Wow.
Yeah.
No.
Was that a Strand family recipe, Joe?
No, it wasn't. But we also, not only with food, Julia Child was doing her show at the same time that we were. And on occasion, we did get ourselves in a bit of trouble
Yes, we
going
did.
into Julia's set.
Yes, we did.
We did indeed. But the funny, I'll tell you one of the funniest parts, to go back to that, and it's actually in the original show, was when we were doing riddles by Donna Moore, and John and I were in a scene together. There's a moment where the two of us have to get up and talk with each other. And if you listen closely, you can hear a nickel fall out of John's pocket, and you can hear this like thing rolling around. And we just started cracking up. I mean, we really.
I remember that.
Oh my goodness.
And Christopher had the brilliance of keeping that take, and you hear the beep, and it was the first outtake ever. I think he set the whole culture of it. And then we went on. But if you look closely, you see that none of us can look at each other anymore. The rest of it, Nina and I couldn't look at each other. I couldn't look at John because we would just start giggling.
Giggling,
Okay.
yes.
Here's a question from Charles Moskowitz. I always wondered why you were all barefooted.
First of all,
Nina
let me say
started
hello to
it.
Charlie. He's
I
a
don't
great fan
know.
from Facebook. Thank you, Charlie Moskowitz. So glad that you're on the show. We love being barefoot.
I don't know how we ended up barefoot. I honestly don't remember.
But we weren't getting
Does
paid
anybody
very much.
remember? Well, we came into the studio with shoes on, Joseph. But I don't recall how we ended up barefoot though.
What kid doesn't like to be barefoot?
Right.
This is
Fair
true.
enough.
This is true.
Yeah.
This is true.
Okay, this is from Betsy. I am wondering if the cast or the show itself ever received a message from Mr. Rogers, or did you encounter Fred Rogers in any way?
Mr. Rogers' show was done out of WNET in New
Or,
Orleans, in New
Pittsburgh.
York.
Yeah.
He was in Pittsburgh.
He was in Pittsburgh. Okay.
WQED, but
Okay.
he was known to visit Boston and make appearances. So it's
We
none of
never
the-
met him.
We never saw him. We never saw him.
We did not have an interaction, but I did have an interaction with Alistair Cook, who was the host of Masterpiece Theater, and Christopher Sarson and introduced me to him in the hallways, and he did say that he would sue me for impersonating him, and then he laughed and shook my hand.
Okay, here's another one from Lisa Camarada. Lisa says, do you still have your rugby shirts?
I
I
do.
don't. I
Yeah.
wish I did.
Yeah.
I
Nina,
wish I
tell me
did.
about it. I'm sorry, Nina, I'll go to
Yeah,
next answer.
yeah.
Nina, can you tell me about like where do you keep it? Has anyone worn it since 1972-3?
No, I actually was going to try to put it on for tonight, but honestly,
Little short.
it's like this big. But I have both of my shirts and I have the bell bottoms that I used to wear on the show all the time. And I
Oh,
keep
how
them in
smart
my
of you.
backpack.
So smart.
And
Do
Nancy,
you
what-
guys
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, do you all remember we got from Zoom one Christmas the rugby shirts with our name? Tracy, do you have yours?
Yeah,
still?
no, I wish I did,
don't
but I
have
do
mine
remember
either,
that.
but you
I
do remember it.
that. I do.
It had a
Yes.
little a name monogrammed on a rugby
did.
shirt.
Mm.
That was great, but no, don't have any of those things any longer.
So
Still
that must
do
be-
have my picture like Joe has behind him. When you walked into the when you got past the lobby at WGBH, they had all of our pictures on the wall going straight down the hallway
Yep.
at 125. I still have my picture.
Yeah.
You know, my mom was great at saving everything, so I have everything, including my picture.
Nancy, Christopher
Yes.
has told me that you were kind of the breakout star of season 1, and that is just something
Really?
that happens. Bernadette Yao in the next season, she was kind of the breakout star. Was that something that caused any kind of tension among the 6 or 7 of you, that one of you was getting more attention, or were you not aware of it?
Wasn't aware of it.
I don't think any of us were aware of it.
No, I think, and I've always commended the production crew or production staff. They didn't let us know any of it, and I think it was to keep our innocence and our our cohesiveness between the 7 of us, so there wouldn't be any, oh, you're getting more publicity, you're getting this, you're getting that, with any of us. So no, we weren't privy to it. We all knew just by being, in our own neighborhoods and in our own schools, the popularity of Zoom. But I don't think it brought any tension with the 7 of us, because each of us have our own niche. We have our own lane, and we're just buds, man. We're just 7 kids hanging out after school, raiding the cafeteria, occasionally showing up in the studio. I mean, it was great.
Okay,
but no, we weren't privy to any of that.
Mary has a question that's going to cause some embarrassment, I think. Did any of the cast ever date each other? I thought Joe and Nina would be perfect together.
Oh, so did I.
Oh, wow.
So did I.
Okay.
Do we tell them about the green room episodes or not?
No.
Joe.
Oh, Joe.
No, we don't wanna go there.
I guess we're keeping it PG, folks. Sorry,
Yes,
Mary.
we are. Yes,
Maureen
we are.
has a question. What did the children that were the classmates of Zoom kids think about them being on the show? Nina, you told me earlier that you got some grief for that.
I did. I went on to middle school, and so I think, like Tracy, people were either receptive to the idea or they really were whatever they were. And I got some gum thrown in my hair and some other things like that. So not welcomed by all, but but I had a good group of friends, and especially the cast. So I always had them to rely on.
Anyone else have any like, for better and for worse, experiences with kids, even people who were your friends before you were on TV? Did they treat you differently?
All right. So Dave, you asked me about a cab ride.
Right.
That I don't remember, but Nancy and Tommy do. So.
Yes. Are you talking about that horrible man?
Yeah, I think we should talk about this, because again, when I spoke to Christopher earlier,
I don't remember it. And maybe
we
I
talked
blocked it
about
out.
the social context you were in, and my understanding is that you got cab rides. You were sent home in a cab together. It was Kenny, Nancy, and Tommy together. And Tommy, why don't you tell me, because you're the one who remembers it most vividly, I think.
Yes, GBH would send us 3 together to go home because we lived in the same direction. And we had to leave our safe space in our studio, and we got into this cab with this cab driver that was going on with all this racist stuff, and I was completely frightened at what happened and what I had to hear. And it was something that I had never experienced before. So
from an adult.
Yeah, and I can't believe that he would say these things to a kid.
Nancy, do you remember this incident at all?
I don't. I honestly don't. And I
Neither
think
do
it was more self-preservation, not to try to remember it.
Maybe.
And they put it in the back. I do remember. I mean, we always took cab rides home together. I do remember a couple of the guys were just nasty. Oh, who are you kids? Oh, you're getting free rides. I mean, that kind of thing. I don't remember the racism, but once again, I may have just covered it over because wasn't a pleasant memory.
Well, and for me, as I said, when I moved to Texas and I was teased, it got one boy on the playground was calling me Zoom girl, and he took a playground ball and threw it at me while I was on a swing and hit me with it. And then I learned what corporal punishment was, which was an in thing in Texas in 1974. And he got taken to the principal's office and got what they called licks with a wooden paddle for calling me Zoom girl. So of course I felt terrible because he threw a ball at me and then he got paddled. So that was crazy.
It was a different time. We'll just say that.
A different time, most definitely.
And yet, unfortunately, David, not so different. That's the problem. That's part of what we're hoping people recognize, that 50 years later, there are some things that are still going on. But here we are, 21 of us,
it's still going on.
And we are here together. And I hope people can recognize that. that we can.
I went to my
that-
first bar mitzvah because of Zoom. I'd never been, and it's just, I mean, we're all a melting pot, and I didn't mean to cut you off, Joe, but I always do. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you cut off Joe, Nancy, because I'm
I always cut
authentically
Joe off.
curious about the transformative, the transformative effect that Zoom had on your lives.
So, all right, just I want to do this real quick
Sure.
and see if anybody recognizes this.
Oh my gosh.
It's an original.
That's an original. That is an original. That's an original from back in the day.
That's
So,
awesome, Kenny. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's go back to
What
the
is it?
transformative effect of
that's our shirt. So we used to wear it back then.
how did Zoom change your lives? Like there was a before Nancy and an after Nancy.
Well, I was 8, so there wasn't much before that I can remember other than, kindergarten. After Zoom, I was popular. Sometimes I didn't want to be popular. But once again, being exposed to the making of a television show, because that's also a part we don't talk about. We weren't not technically, being the producers or directors, but we had input. So our hands and fingers were all over each production or each segment. And out of that, and just being around television, I mean, I came back to GBH over the years and did stuff, and then once again came back to work in local programming. It steered me into that direction. It steered me into to try my foot in acting. Like I said, I went to BU School of Fine Arts and majored in acting, and then halfway through said, no, I want to be behind the camera. But if I hadn't had the experience with Zoom and the wonderful crew and the wonderful production folks that were behind the scenes that welcomed a bunch of prepubescent children and with open arms and with patience and how do you do this? How do you do that? And they were willing to show us. And I think that fostered my career path.
Nina, you've worked in higher ed, or you did work in higher ed. Did any of your choices, were they affected by Zoom in any way?
No, I don't think so. After Zoom, I wanted to continue to do like plays and things like that. And I found out I wasn't really that great. I had tried out for this one part in Damn Yankees, and another woman got it. She was this absolutely gorgeous Black woman who was so incredibly sexy. I was like, oh, I'm really not that good. It was kind of
Joe, we'll move on to Joe. Joe, you have said unequivocally that Zoom affected your life and career trajectory.
Yeah, David, it has. It laid the foundation for everything that I'm doing now in child psychiatry. Because what Zoom represented was respect and value, and how a bunch of strangers, remember, every friend was once a stranger. Mm-hmm. And we came together, and it was magic. But it also showed me that when you respect someone and value someone, the other person will trust you. And with that trust, we can do anything. There was so much trust in that studio among all of us. And I think that's part of what showed in our productions, because it was real. I mean, so it absolutely has laid the foundation for everything that I've done. And actually, that's going to be part of my next book called Unleashing the Power of Respect, because that's what it is. It's all about respect. When's the last time you got angry at someone treating you with respect? So David, absolutely, it laid the foundation for everything I've done since then.
That's wonderful. I think it's time for an ubby-dubby break. So GBH folks, if we could have that ubby-dubby clip, please.
Abis, abba bubby, dabba bubby. Abbe labang gubbage, thabet abis vubba rubby, abby zubby, tabu lubber. Abif yabu wabud labite tabu spubik abit, rubbite, zaboom, babox thrubby fubbive abo, bubba stubbin mabas, abo tabu wubban thrubby fubor.
Nancy, this was a new language to us back then. Was that hard even for you?
Yes, to answer your question, and I never did any of the promos or anything in WW. Bubby covers, I might have it Rebel Livings, Bubby Cabot Wabel. So, I mean, and that's only been perfected with time, but it was a challenge. It was definitely a challenge.
Well, Nina, were you chosen for that because you were the ringer who mastered it right away?
I'm actually not sure, but I know that I took to it pretty quickly. And there are other languages of the same ilk. They just use different, vowels and stuff that come before or after words.
It's one of Zoom's greatest legacies. Do any of you still encounter, Tracy, do you encounter Ubby Dubby in your life, or have you since?
I do, and it's funny, as I posted something on Facebook about the 50th anniversary, one of my friends reached out and said she uses Ubby Dubby when she hits her shin on something and curses. That she curses in Ubby Dubby, and she told me the specific term that she used, and it's very effective in Ubby Dubby.
So you can get around the FCC by cursing in Ubby Dubby.
Exactly.
Then it's a great stress reliever.
Okay, we got a couple more questions I want to get to you. Mark says, can we still get the stained glass cookie recipe? I love those. My mom made them for us. Does anyone remember the stained glass cookie recipe?
Tommy just happened to have
Wait, I get the book right. You mean this one?
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah.
It's in the
That's
Zoom
the
Do. It's in the Do a Zoom Do book, but it was also in this book that GBH put out.
Well, how available is that book? Is that a rare book, or is that something you can find?
Rare. I don't know. I've got 15 of them if you want to get them.
Take a picture of it and post it on the chat, Tommy.
Yeah, just post on the chat right to Tom White. And speaking of writing too, there's a question that was answered in the chat. I want to make clear. A few people have asked, if you write to Box 350, Boston, Mass, what'll happen? And I'm the one deeded with this horrible task of saying that Box 350 is no longer a real mailbox service for WGBH, and even harder to contend with is WGBH's zip is no longer 02134. And so reality is sobering sometimes, people, but live life to the fullest, as Dr.
Exactly.
Here's a good one, because you mentioned, Joe, the script that Donna Moore sent in to be acted out in the very first episode. Is that the same Donna Moore who became part of Zoom in the cast?
Yes, it is. I believe Donna has the unique privilege, but not just privilege, but the absolute amazing skill set that she was both a writer that we chose, a very first show, and an incredible actress. And she's got an amazing career as well. Yes. You're going to be really fun to listen to her next week, folks. Be sure you tune in, because it's going to be a great show next week.
Yeah, she does. Didn't she write a Broadway play?
She had an off-Broadway show about cougars. So it was really terrific. So hopefully Donna will tell you about that next week.
Cougars the big cats, or Cougars
Cougar the musical?
Cougar the musical.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and that answers a question people had about people going into the arts, because Leon Mobley, who will also be joining us in next week's talk, is a professional percussionist. Who's with Ben Harper's group. He's been an arts ambassador during the Obama administration. So yes, it's a real thing that some people did pursue lives in the arts after Zoom. Okay, here's a good one. The postcards. Kevin is asking about the postcards. There's even a Save the Show write-in postcard campaign. Do you remember the postcards, and do you remember posing for them and being a part of that?
Zoom cards.
Zoom cards. I remember them all, but there is one that's unique, and I don't know if everybody has one. It's the first Zoom card that says, it's in black and white, and it's an aerial shot over from a crane camera down onto the 7 of us, and inside it says Zoom is coming. Pass it on. And that was I don't know how the marketing department did all of that and got those cards out, but they would have us, or at least with me, and everyone can speak to their own experience, sit down and say, okay, we're going to take a bunch of pictures, And then they would decide which one became the Zoom card. We had no decisions in any of that. It was somebody they picked.
Yeah, I wish I washed my hair that day.
Tommy, in that intro we watched earlier, it's looking pretty good.
We did Zoom cards. So,
Yeah.
So.
And that was, I can just speak from experience. I had a sister who was 5 years older than me, so really more in line with Tommy and Nina's age. And when she received her Zoom card, which was about how to make macrame or something, she practically levitated with joy.
Wow. Wow.
So that's the impact that you had on people, in that you didn't realize you were kids living your lives, that you were, celebrity is the wrong word, inspirational figures, because you were relatable and at the same time you were on television.
I'm just going to say that it was almost like a switch got flipped, from being Nancy, who was on her way to this great new after school thing called Zoom, and it broadcasting, and then the popularity. And I know in my neighborhood, there's everybody would go inside to watch Zoom, and then I would come outside and the kids would like flip out and say, how did you get out of the TV so quickly? Because we were all little kids and it was the age of innocence. But as the show became popular, my life had to change. I couldn't go anywhere by myself. I couldn't go to the corner store. I couldn't go, so it was the adjustments of popularity wasn't something that we asked to have. We're happy that it did happen that way. People loved the show. I think as a 9-year-old, because I was 8, 9, and 10 when I went off, it was a little difficult for me, only because of, the environment, and just, parents are scary when they pushing the kids to you and here, sign the autograph, and you're 9 and you have no idea. So,
well, and unlike the cast that came after us, we didn't know what we were auditioning for.
Exactly.
So of course, we had no idea what it would become.
We didn't either.
So
we
had the innocence. So all the 7 of us, we had the innocence of just going out and trying out for something that sounded fun. That our other friends and castmates later on knew, and they wanted to be a part of Zoom, and so they auditioned for something because they wanted to be part of what existed. We didn't know what we were getting ourselves into.
We didn't.
Believe it or not, we're nearing the end of our gathering, and we have to start wrapping up. So I want to ask big picture. 50 years on, 50 years. First of all, that's extraordinary.
40. I'm not claiming 50. Sorry.
Tough luck, Kenny. It's 50. It's empirical.
Never claim it.
No, whatever.
It's 50, Kenny.
Mute Kenny, please mute Kenny.
I told you I'm going to be me. That's me.
The question is.
But anyway, what's your question?
You look back at that time and you see what the 7 of you were doing together. Is there anything we can learn now in what's admittedly a troubled time from what the 7 of you and Zoom Papa Christopher Sarson did back then?
Yes,
all right.
I think so.
All right. Yeah. All right. So let me answer this real quick. First, please. Thank you, Joe. Can't stand you, but anyway.
This is exactly what we learned. To respect each other and listen to Kenny.
Respect each other and tolerance.
All right. So 40 years later.
50 years later.
Let's roll with Kenny's.
I told you I don't want to.
Go ahead. All
right. So 40 years later, we still love each other like it was back when we were doing our thing for Zoom back in the day. And that's not going to change.
Right.
Okay. So you think about how things were back in the day, how people thought about each other and blah, 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 blah. We didn't have any of that.
No.
We didn't have any of that whatsoever. We were like, oh, who's this? Oh, Nancy. Who's this? Oh, Nina. Who's this? Oh, Joe. And
we were just kids.
We were just kids, and we did what we did.
And Joe, do you want to jump in there and talk about what you were going to say?
Yeah, I think what the message here, folks, is when you really just wonder why people do what they do, who they are, and treat them with respect, it's remarkable what can happen. You can see someone for who they are because they will share that with you. And that's what we've done for 50 years. That's what we're modeling. And I hope that it stays that way. Respect leads to value, and value leads to trust. And we've got 50 years to show you that it really works.
40.
And also, I think we were a little microcosm. So we were 7 kids from different parts of Boston. Nancy was from Roxbury, Tommy from Dorchester, Nina and Joe and I from Newton. And so in our little world, when they all came together, we were just kids. Nancy and I were both 9 years old. I was, you know, a white girl from the suburbs, and Nancy was a black girl from the inner city. But we met each other and we were fast
We
friends.
hit it
and we
off.
got
Yep.
together. So it was relatable whether you were in Indiana or Tennessee or any place else. And I think that's why people connected, that it didn't matter what neighborhood you lived in, what city, what state. We're all just kids, and we all share more in common than we have differences.
And
Tracy,
I
that's
also
all-
have to thank you,
sorry.
Tracy, for introducing me to Carole King.
There
I
you
remember
go.
distinctly listening
Now,
to Carole King.
speaking of singing, we've got to wrap this up now, but I want to first thank all of you, Tracy, Joe, Nancy, Tommy, Kenny, and Nina. And I also want to encourage everyone who's enjoyed this to contribute to GBH using the prompts provided in the chat. And I want you to join us next week using the link provided so you can meet the season 2 and 3 kids. But Zoomers, season 1 Zoomers, I think we should do now the thing that we talked about doing to end. So
Let's
I'm
do
gonna
it.
count-
Let's do
I'm gonna
it.
count you in. I'm gonna count you in. Ready?
Mhm.
350 Boston, Mass.
Oh,
2,
2,
1, 3,
3, 4. Send it to
Excellent.
Zoom.
Thank you and good night, gang.
Thanks, David. Thanks,
Good night.
GBH.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
fans. Much
Thank you.
appreciated.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, all.
Bye all.
Bye.